Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, giving you my Week 10 2022 NFL predictions. Well, this week for the Fanatic, it was a good week. It was a good week. Not as good as I did last week, and definitely in terms of my against the spread predictions. But thanks to the great word push in terms of betting picks, I actually ended up doing okay. And straight up, I had another fantastic week. Very well done for me. Double-digit week in a 13-game week, which is incredibly hard to do. But I will gladly take that. But so far this week against the spread, due to the Chargers, Falcons, and Vikings, Commanders games going to 3 points exactly, I got 2 pushes in 12 games. So overall this week against the spread, I went 5-2 against the spread, and straight up I went 10-2. 5 out of every 6 games I got predicted correctly. That equals up to 83.3% straight up. One of the definitely back-to-back best week stretches I've had, and I'm definitely moving in the right direction, or in the positive direction that I like seeing in terms of my predictions. And against the spread, I went 5-2, so that gives you a 500 record. And now overall for the year, I am now 65-66 with 4 pushes. And I am now straight up 80-54-1, which equals up to 59.6%. So if I do really well in this 14-game week, this week straight up, I should be able to cross back into the 60% threshold, which I am incredibly ecstatic about. And going 65-66-4, which equals up to about 49.6%. I'm sorry, I guess I forgot to change that number. 49.6%. That's not great, but again, going past the halfway mark into the year now, to be able to get to around 500, it's much better than I usually get at any point during the season. And once again, just for everybody this week, I have the Baltimore Ravens tonight -2.5 over the New Orleans Saints. Should be an interesting game, especially with Mark Andrews and Gus Edwards being out for the Ravens this week. Mark Andrews did not even travel with the team. But what a wild week in the NFL, just as they always are. Nobody, with the 2 losses I had, if anybody really had the Jets genuinely beating Buffalo straight up, and the Lions, who had the worst defense in the league, the worst offensive outing the Lions had given up was 24 points. That was the whole year. The Packers yesterday only put up 9 points. Only put up 9. That shows you how bad it was for the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers threw 2 horrible, dreadful red zone interceptions. First time in his career he did that. And they just could not get anything going. Aaron Jones left with an ankle injury. Romeo Doubs has a high ankle sprain. So now they're going to have to put him on the IR along with Randall Cobb, who's already been out. So that they are losing receivers left and right. It's really Christian Watson, Robert Tonyan, and Sammy Watkins, and nobody else. And then the Bills and Jets. A game to where, look, the Jets were coming off a very tough and sad loss to their division rival, the Patriots, who they've lost 13 straight times to. They go have the Bills at home. Josh Allen has his worst game of the year. Puts together, I believe, a 46.8 quarterback rating. No TDs, 2 picks. He had 86 of their rushing yards and both of their rushing touchdowns. And it was just an overall all-around bad game. And for the Jets, that to me felt like a turning point game for their season and for the franchise perception moving forward. Because with that Jets rookie class of Garrett Wilson, Jermaine Johnson, Sauce Gardner, you have Quinnen Williams, they didn't even have Corey Davis. They had Elijah Moore back. This is a roster that should not have been able to win that game. But they were able to, in a gritty, tough defensive game. I think I saw something where the Jets had the most sacks in terms of standard pressure, which was incredibly impressive. But the Jets, I think, are a legitimate playoff team. I don't think they're not Buffalo on most given days, or Kansas City, or even Miami. But I do think with the Jets, they could at least compete with all those teams. And, they'll make the playoffs. I feel very good in saying that, just with the remainder of their schedule. And also, I just have to give Zach Wilson credit. If you take out the rushing numbers for Josh Allen, he outplayed Josh Allen in terms of quarterback sense, which nobody really would have thought that would have happened. I want to congratulate the Chicago Bears and Dolphins. That was probably the most entertaining game of the weekend. 35-32. Tua completed 21 of 30 passes for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. Tyreek Hill has 1,104 yards receiving through 9 games at his NFL record since the merger. He is on pace to have the NFL's first ever 2,000-yard season as a wide receiver. Jalen Waddle also didn't do that bad as well. They definitely, their pass rush doesn't look that different, and that's after adding Bradley Chubb to a ridiculous 5-year, $110 million extension, which I did not think he deserved. But the Dolphins, hey, in those kind of games, that's one of those things to where they can win those type of games now. If they're getting into, they would much rather get into offensive shootouts than grimy defensive games. Though I do want to congratulate Justin Fields, though. The Bears, for the first time since the 1976 Steelers, rushed for another 225 yards on the ground. Justin Fields had the single most rushing yards by a quarterback since, I believe, 1935 with 178 yards. The last quarterback to have that many rushing yards, I believe, was Michael Vick, 176. So, kudos to him. And I'm really impressed with what Justin Fields has done offensively since he has been adding more of his legs into the offense. He has really vitalized that offense. And I think in a way, like if you're Chicago, even though you're not winning these games, you are in these games in a way to go, okay, you may have found your best quarterback since Sid Luckman back in the 30s. You may have found it, but, I digress there. Also, kudos to Adam Van Ginkel for picking up the 4th block punt of the year on Gill. That's only the 4th block punt of the entire season. Let's see, a couple other quick things. I wanted to say congrats to the Bengals. They got right back on track against the Panthers. They were up 35-0. It was a garbage time game after that. Brandon Allen could come in the 4th quarter. Joe Mixon had 5 rushing touchdowns, which is incredibly impressive, which I believe was it tied a NFL record. It definitely set a Bengals record. And the Panthers, they finally showed after the 2 games with Wilkes beating the Bucks, coming within, unsportsmanlike conduct only against the Falcons. They finally showed that the Panthers were just as bad a team that got Matt Rule fired. So there was that. I want to congratulate Jacksonville for getting that 17-point comeback against the Las Vegas Raiders. That's the 3rd time the Raiders have blown a 17-point lead this year. I believe they joined the Baltimore Ravens as the only team this year, or multiple 17-plus point blown leads. And Josh McDaniels continues to wither and wither away like a dying plant. And I'm not going to go into the rant like I did last week, but I just want to, if anyone wants my opinion on Josh McDaniels, watch last week's video. I'm just saying, I feel vindicated. That's all I'm going to say. And any Josh McDaniel fanboys out there, any Josh McDaniel fanboys that are still sucking his teeth, you go enjoy that bum too. Hear what Devontae said. Hear what Derek said. They do not believe in that bum. That's all I'm going to say about this week. I'm not going to go into another tangent. But, yeah, so that was fun. Alright, but those are my quick thoughts, and I'll get through the rest of some other thoughts well throughout the games. But time for my picks. But before I get into those, it is week 10 of the season, so it's another round of buys. So this week, the Baltimore Ravens, the Cincinnati Bengals, the New England Patriots, and the New York Jets are the teams on bye this week. So if you have Lamar Jackson, any of the Ravens running backs, the Ravens defense, Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, the Pats defense, the Damian Harris, Mac Jones, Devontae Parker, Zach Wilson, Garrett Wilson, James Robinson, the Jets defense, Greg Zuerlein. If you have any of those players on your fantasy teams, bench them because they will not be playing this weekend. All right, it's time for my picks for this week. So on Thursday, when the 4-5 Atlanta Falcons travel to Carolina to take on the 2-7 Carolina Panthers, the Atlanta Falcons are 2.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Atlanta here, -2.5, and Atlanta straight up. Then the next game, when the 6-3 Seattle Seahawks travel to Munich, Germany, the first international game in NFL's history in Germany, when they take on the 4-5 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, amazingly, even though they got that big win over the Rams in that ugly, awkward game, Tampa Bay is a 1-point favorite in this game, even though it's not a true home game. I am going to, once again, I think that people are still doubting this Seattle team. I'm going to take Seattle here with the points to win here. Seattle +1 and Seattle straight up. Then the next game, in the biggest game of the weekend, in my opinion, the most entertaining, the most high-stake game, when the 7-1 Minnesota Vikings travel to Buffalo to take on the 6-2 Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills, amazingly, after what the performance they had yesterday against the Jets, they are 7.5-point favorites entering this game. Give me the Buffalo Bills here to win straight up, but I'm going to take the Minnesota Vikings easily, plus 7.5. Then the next game, when the 2-6 Detroit Lions travel to Chicago to take on the 3-5 Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears are 2.5-point favorites in this game, giving the Chicago Bears here minus 2.5, and the Chicago Bears straight up. Then the next game, when the 3-5 Denver Broncos travel to Tennessee to take on the 5-3 Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans are 2-point favorites in this game. I'm going to take Tennessee here minus 2 and Tennessee straight up, but I just want to, so for all the viewers out there, so I'm not waffling, or so everybody knows, if Ryan Tannehill is inactive once again and Malik Willis has to start his third consecutive game, I'm going to switch that pick and I will update it with the spread, but I'm going to take Denver, whatever the line will be, against the spread and straight up. So if Ryan Tannehill is active, I'm going to take the Titans minus 2 and the Titans straight up. But if Ryan Tannehill is inactive for his third straight game, I'm going above Denver against the spread and straight up. So there's a little caveat there. But for right now, with how close Tannehill was, I'm going to take Tennessee here minus 2, Tennessee straight up. Then the next game, when the 3-5 Jacksonville Jaguars, when the 3-6 Jacksonville Jaguars travel to Kansas City to take on the 6-2 Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs are 9.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Kansas City here to win straight up, but I'm going to take Jacksonville plus 9.5. Then the next game, when the 3-5 Cleveland Browns go to Miami to take on the 6-3 Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins are 4-point favorites in this game. Give me Miami here minus 4 and Miami straight up. Then the next game, when the 1-6-1 Houston Texans travel to New York to take on the 6-2 New York Giants. The New York Giants are 7-point favorites in this game. Give me the Houston Texans here plus 7, but I'm going to take the New York Giants straight up. Then the next game, when the 4-5 or 3-6 New Orleans Saints travel to Pittsburgh to take on the 2-6 Pittsburgh Steelers. The New Orleans Saints are 2.5-point favorites in this game, giving the New Orleans Saints here minus 2.5, and New Orleans Saints straight up. Then the next game, when the 3-5-1 Indianapolis Colts travel to Las Vegas to take on the 2-6 Las Vegas Raiders. The Las Vegas Raiders are 6-point favorites in this game. Give me the Las Vegas Raiders here, minus 6, and the Las Vegas Raiders straight up. Then the next game, when the 6-2 Dallas Cowboys go to Green Bay to take on the 3-6 Green Bay Packers. The Dallas Cowboys are 5-point favorites in this game. Give me the Dallas Cowboys here, minus 5, and the Dallas Cowboys straight up. And then in the next game, when the 3-5 Arizona Cardinals travel to Los Angeles to take on the 3-5 Los Angeles Rams. The Los Angeles Rams are 3.5-point favorites in this game. Give me the Los Angeles Rams here to win straight up, but I'm going to take Arizona plus 3.5. Then the next game on Sunday night, when the 5-3 Los Angeles Chargers travel to San Francisco in an intrastate rivalry when they take on the 4-4 San Francisco 49ers. The San Francisco 49ers are 4-point favorites in this game. Give me San Francisco here minus 7 and San Francisco straight up. And then in the Monday night game, when the 4-5 Washington Commanders travel to Philadelphia to take on the 8-0 Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles are 10.5-point favorites in this game. Give me the Washington Commanders here plus 10.5, but the Philadelphia Eagles straight up. All right, it's time for my quick thoughts on each game. The Atlanta Falcons over the Carolina Panthers. This one to me was fairly simple. You know, when you look at what happened with the Panthers yesterday, through the first half, P.J. Walker, after having 2 solid games through his first 2 starts against the Bucs and Falcons respectively, against the Bengals did what they did against the NFC South opponents at home. They just completely wiped through them. P.J. Walker only had 32 yards of total offense and 2 turnovers that put the Panthers in that 35-0 hole. Baker Mayfield actually came in the second half and relieved him, and Baker Mayfield threw 2 garbage time touchdowns. The Bengals would end up scoring, I think, 1 more touchdown, or Joe Mixon had his 5th rushing touchdown, which gave them a 42-21 victory. And the Panthers, after having such great games on the ground from Deontay Foreman, who I believe had 236 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns the last 2 games, as a combined unit, they only ran for 64 yards the other game. And and you now have Sam Darnold for the first time since his ankle injury in the last game of the preseason. He's getting activated off the IR, so he is now an option once again for the Panthers. So Baker, Sam, and PJ, they all could maybe get a start. Sam could get a nod. Baker could get back in the job, or PJ could keep it. How bad it was. And look, the Falcons, they played another typical Falcons game. I do want to congratulate Cordero Patterson, who had 44 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns in his return from the IR after his ankle injury. But the biggest issue that the Falcons had, it was the lack or the depth of running versus passing ratio. The Falcons combined had 201 rushing yards, and Mariota only threw 129 passing yards. So that's not bad for a running game, but when you're playing a Charger team that could have opportunities, that's really a tough issue. And Kyle Pitts, he's having a rough time. He only had 2 receptions and 7 targets for 27 yards. And Drake London basically might have cost him the game with that Khalil Mack strip, the pickpocket on him around the end zone that got him back to the midfield. And look, the Falcons, I believe, only this year have 2 losses against the spread all year. Because I do believe that even though I had the line at 3, I think it was 2.5, so I ended up losing that game. But this Falcons team is a much better team than the Panthers. We just saw them play this game 2 weeks ago. So this is one of those sandwich games where you play the division rival 2 times in 3 weeks, and it's a short week. Atlanta last year beat Carolina in this same spot. So I feel like, this Atlanta team, they're not out of this division race yet, even though you could still buy Tampa, just how Brady played, and I'll talk about that game here very shortly. But I just look at the Falcons and go, this has been a better team. They've been able to run the ball more effectively. Joe Mixon just had a career day, so I think Patterson, Huntley, and Algieric, could all run effectively. I think Mariota, plays an efficient game. They use their weapons effectively. I just don't think the Panthers, they haven't been as bad under Wilkes over this 3-game stretch you have, but I just don't think they win this game. I think, DJ looks lost. Their tight ends have become basically irrelevant, and I don't know who's starting, and I just think whoever's starting is not going to have a great opportunity against the Falcons defense, which has done a pretty good job in most ways on most weapons. So that's why I like Atlanta here, -2.5, and Atlanta straight up. The next game, the Seattle Seahawks going to Munich, Germany to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Seattle Seahawks over them. I am taking the Seattle Seahawks here based off the fact that even when you look at Tampa, which, again, that was a big-time victory for the Buccaneers, very awkward game. It was basically the exact opposite of what the divisional round playoff was for them last year. I thought, the Rams-Bucks game was awkward. It was sloppy. It was basically who could make the less mistakes. I do want to congratulate Brady for a couple milestones. He broke Peyton Manning's record for the most fourth-quarter comebacks in NFL history. I believe he now has 56, which broke the tie with Manning, and he has now passed for 100,000 career regular and postseason passing yards, which is incredibly impressive. And he did throw another touchdown at the end to Cade Otton, Mr. Cotton Man, which was, I think, the next, another receiver that he gets to add to his record list for how many receivers that they've called a touchdown, or receivers and tight ends called a touchdown from Tom Brady. So, again, at the end of the day, kudos to the Bucs, and Vita Vea also the big game, I think, with 2 big sacks. But that's just how bad the Rams' offensive line is. But you're going into this game playing a Seahawks team that now has won 4 straight games by double digits. Like I said last week, that's like the first time since 2015, the last bit of 2015 where they had a stretch like that. Geno Smith is leading the league in completion percentage at 73.3 and has a career-high 15 touchdowns through only 9 starts. And when you look at the Seahawks, here was an impressive thing that if people looked at the NFL news last week. The Seahawks, I believe, had one of the first ever where they had the Offensive Player of the Year in Geno Smith. They had the Offensive Rookie of the Year, Kenneth Walker II, and they had the Defensive Rookie the Offensive Rookie of the Month, Kenneth Walker, the Defensive Rookie of the Month, Tariq Wooten, and then they had the Offensive Player of the Month, Geno Smith. And another one of those rookie who I like, Kobe Bryant, not C-O-B-Y, not K-O-B-E. Kobe Bryant has led the league in forced fumbles, and he forced one against the Cardinals, which basically kind of changed the momentum of the game, or at the end of the half, with 4. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to Noah Fan, who had his 4th highest receiving yards of his career. And I just kind of, and again, he also did have that 51-yard screen, which kind of broke the game open in that last second drive there. when you look at this game, I know people might look at Tampa and go, look, Seattle's defense, it's not great. They've been very fortunate with turnovers and the offense they played. But I just look at Seattle and go, I just trust Geno. I trust how the offensive line for Seattle has kind of been righted with the 2 draft picks along with Damian Lewis and everybody else there. That offensive line's playing pretty well. You would take Seattle's running game over Tampa's in a big spot right now. I'm not saying Fournette's better than Kenneth Walker, but Kenneth Walker and that offense is being able to run the ball more effectively. They have the receiving offense are about to push. The secondaries, I think Tampa fully healthy has a better secondary. But that pass rush, which Geno's mobility that Tom doesn't have, I just think Geno can evade a bit more pass rushers and make plays. And I just think Seattle, they've proven that in this stretch, they've won 4 straight games. They are a legitimate team. The only bad game they have had all year, seriously, was the game against the Niners in Week 2 where they got shut out 20-0 and Geno couldn't score an offensive touchdown. It was Michael Jackson who scored the special teams touchdown. And look, it's one of those things that, look, did Brady need that? Did the Bucs need that? Absolutely. They needed that kind of spark of momentum and happiness. But, I'm not going to be a prisoner of the moment of how bad the Rams are or just how awkward the Rams' offensive play calling at the end was to say that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to go into Germany and win this type of game. I think Seattle, look, they've been in these international spots before. Carroll has a good record against, East Coast teams when he's had to travel out that far. It's the farthest journey that the NFL has had to take for a football game. So I think that'll be interesting, but I'm just going to trust Pete Carroll and that Seattle staff of what I've seen more consistently than I have with Tampa. Also, with Tampa's lack of running game, I think that's going to be a huge problem going against Seattle defense. So that's what I like Seattle here +1 and Seattle straight up. The next game, the Buffalo Bills over the Minnesota Vikings. This is one to where, look, Minnesota, you have to like them and you have to give Kevin O'Connell the credit for this. I don't think he's the coach of the year. I would actually probably put him 3rd behind Brian Daboll and Mike McDaniel. I do think that Sirianni, if he goes undefeated, will get the award, but I think just a common thing. But Minnesota, the one thing he has been able to do is get the Vikings to win 1-score games. So they've been basically in 6 of their 8 games, they are in 1-score games. Last year they were in 14 1-score games and went 6-8. This year they're 6-0 in those 1-score games. Kirk Cousins had 2 really bad interceptions, which really kind of kept them within a float. But Justin Jefferson, thanks to his 19th career 100-yard receiving game, which ties, I believe, Odell Beckham and Randy Moss for the most by a receiver through his first 3 seasons. And if you take away the crazy 49-yard pass from Taylor Heineke to Curtis Samuel, who jumped over Patrick Peterson and Harrison Smith, Taylor Heineke ended up only 100 yards passing and a touchdown without that Samuel pass. The Vikings, again, their defense, Harrison Smith got a big turnover. They play consistent enough with their running game. I believe TJ Hockenson had 70 yards on receiving, so he definitely was a decent contributor in his first game. And I just, you look at that Vikings roster and you've seen every single week, they give you the same game week after week after week. Okay? But when you look at the Bills, like I mentioned before, they had their worst game of the year. The Bills roster, outside of Josh Allen, the running backs and tight ends for the Bills, besides Allen, had 48 yards rushing. Josh Allen literally doubled the rest of the Bills' running backs and receivers that tried to make rushing plays. That's, usually Josh Allen, when he has a really bad moment, bounces back, and I just am going to have to believe that he can bounce back in this game. I think when you look at the Bills and the Vikings, it's something to where Kirk Cousins, it's a 1:00 game, so I would have felt better with the Bills if this was, a 4:20 an afternoon game or a primetime game, because everybody knows how bad Kirk Cousins is as a primetime and late afternoon quarterback. But at the end of the day, when you look at this kind of game, I think Josh Allen bounced back. Usually, most often over the last couple of years, when Josh Allen has a bad game, he usually bounces back and plays pretty well after a loss. I think, I remember in Josh Allen's first career victory, I believe, was against his Vikings team, and the Vikings were the largest favorite in NFL history, and that was one of the largest upsets in betting history. Josh Allen's first career victory against the Minnesota Vikings. Again, that was 4 years ago, and a lot's changed. But I am just going to trust that the Bills roster, with all the talent they have, some of the talent they hopefully can get back soon, even though Matt Milano's injury was big, and they just lost Gregory Rougeau to, I believe, to an ankle sprain. So I definitely think that, the Bills are coming in hobbled, but I think the Bills have enough grit, and I just trust Josh Allen enough that he'll make a few more big plays with his feet and his arm that Kirk Cousins can't. But I just think with how bad the Bills played against the Jets and how consistent the Vikings have been in all year, that 7.5 was way too many points to look at these two rosters with the talent they have at quarterback, running back, receivers. Like, these two teams are more evenly matched than you think. So I think 7.5 is just way too many. I think Josh Allen at home wins this one and gets a good back, a bounce back, a right back game, if you will, against this Vikings team, which again has some decent secondary players, but I do think the Bills' offensive line should be able to hold up. And I think Josh's legs will be the difference. But I think with how good the Vikings have been, this is one of those 50-50 good games. The Vikings can win this game outright. I'm going to give the Vikings their credit and say it's a one-score game with how maybe up and down the Bills can be. And also, here's the problem. If it is a one-score game where the Vikings are 6-0 over the last few years, Josh Allen, 2-6 in his last 8 one-score games, though he has 2 wins this year, so he's 2-1 this year in terms of one-score games. So that's why I like the Buffalo Bills here to win straight up at the Minnesota Vikings, plus 7.5. The next game, the Chicago Bears over the Detroit Lions. This is one to where, as much as I like Dan Campbell, and as happy as I personally was to see him beat the Packers in a grimy, odd, awkward home game, what I've seen out of the Bears, I just can't get enough of it. I do want to give Kirby Joseph credit. He got 2 interceptions on Aaron Rodgers, incredibly impressive, and Aiden Hutchinson got his first interception. But I also just thought the Packers were morons trying to run a tackle-eligible play to David Bakhtiari, who I didn't know was that good. Even though, to be fair, he was wide open in the end zone. That was just more Rodgers underthrowing the football. But when you look at this game, I just have to trust the Bears' offense, man. And I just remember last year, I was... let me get my answer. When this game was last year, I remember I was very confident because I thought Justin Fields looked like an absolute garbage can. And I felt incredibly confident that Dan Campbell, as bad as the Lions were, even though the Lions were starting to get a little momentum, I'm like, okay, they're going to go into Chicago and kick the tar out of the Bears. And boy, was I wrong, because Jared Goff went in there, played a mediocre game. Justin Fields used his legs and a few timely passes to win. And as much as these two teams have improved or made you feel like they are more competitive, at the end of the day, I'm going to go back to the stat that I've always said, which stay true until it changes. Jared Goff, as the Detroit Lions quarterback, has never won a road game. And you can't tell me, with how bad that, the Lions defense is, with that rushing attack, I think they said that Justin Fields over the last 3 weeks, there are only 3 running backs in the league that have more rushing yards than he does. You just can't tell me, with that Bears offense, from what you've seen out of it, with Herbert, with Kmet, with Mooney, with Claypool now, even though, and you could argue, in that game against the Dolphins, there was a very questionable call that maybe should have given the Bears an opportunity to at least kick the game-tying field goal. I just can't go against that offense right now, against this Lions defense. Like, I think the Bears, it's sad that the Bears have better offensive positioning and movement and momentum compared to the Packers when they have Aaron Rodgers compared to Justin Fields. But I just have to trust that the Bears offense, with Justin Fields' legs and, with all the big arm plays and leg plays he can make, I think they win that game off of that. Even though I do want to say one thing, though. The Bears, they traded away Roquan Smith and Robert Quinn this past week to the Ravens and Eagles, respectively. Just for a fun fact, in an offensive shootout like that, how many sacks did the Bears get on defense last week? A big donut. A big 0. So, maybe in a way, you can understand why they made those moves, but it definitely wasn't helping. So that's why I like the Chicago Bears here, minus 2.5. Chicago Bears straight up. The next game, the Tennessee Titans over the Denver Broncos for now. Look, I want to give Derrick Henry credit. He has averaged 135.4 yards a game in November, or since November moving forward. He is leading the league in rushing at 870 yards. He has 17 games of 100 or more rushing yards and multiple touchdowns on the ground. He's only the 6th player in NFL history to have that kind of number. And if he does that over the next few couple years, he can pass Jim Brown at 25 such games. I just think, the biggest problem for the Titans last night, it was third-round quarterback Malik Willis. That was the issue, everybody. It's sad because Malik Willis right now has completed 40% of his passes for 141 yards and a pick. That's his 2 games. And I think I heard this week, I think they said in the second half of the Titans game, the second half of the game last night between Titans and Chiefs, the Tennessee Titans did not even register a first down in the second half, which is mind-baffling that it got that close and they got pushed to overtime with the ball. Kudos to the Titans defense there. So, as good and as much as I like Malik the person and as well that you hope he does well, he's not ready for this. He's not ready for this smoke. He's not ready. He's not ready for this. As soon as Ryan Tannehill gets healthy, Tannehill should immediately be put back into the job. And any Titans fan, or shout out to Keith Bailey who shot out a video, or MJ take, I don't want to scare anybody here. I would consider keeping, and I'm going to say it again, I would consider keeping Ryan Tannehill for the 2023 season, just in case Malik doesn't develop. I think he's been that bad. You need to consider. I know Ryan Tannehill, he's not great. He's a mediocre meh quarterback at best, who has kind of basically gotten benefited off of victories, not numbers. But with how bad Malik's played, 12 of 30 for 141 yards and a pick through 2 games, you seriously need to consider keeping Ryan Tannehill as an insurance policy if Malik can't develop enough to get this Titans team to where they need to be. And that's what I'm saying. Look, if Tannehill is active, and if he can play through his ankle injury enough to this game, I think they win this game. If it's Malik Willis for a third time, going up against the Denver defense, which only give up 9 offensive touchdowns in 8 games this year, I know Denver has the 20th ranked rushing defense. And if you want to trust that Derrick Henry will do exactly what he did against the Houston Texans, fine. But that's a lot different, in my opinion, than playing the Denver defense with Russell Wilson is a lot different than playing Davis Mills in the Houston defense. So, and I do want to congratulate the Denver offense for only the second time this year in their 8 games. They put up 21 or more points and they won. To be fair, they lost by 9 the other time when they put up 21 plus points. They lost 32-23 to Las Vegas. But so again, that's why I'm going to go with the Titans. I think Tannehill, with that offense, with that defense, as impressive and consistent their pass rush have been, I do think that the Titans defense, Henry and Tannehill, can do enough to beat the Broncos. If it's Malik and Derrick, even if they try to get to Derrick that much, I don't think Malik could really generate enough throws or enough confidence in the offense to win this game with just his arm. So, if Tannehill plays, though, I will take Tennessee -2. But that's the biggest reason why I'm going with Tennessee. I think Tannehill plays. If Tannehill doesn't, as great as Derrick Henry is, if they put 8 or 9 in the box, try to have Malik throw, I don't think he's going to be that successful against those Denver corners with their Titans receivers, and I think Denver wins easily. So, for right now, I'm going to take Tennessee -2 because I believe Tannehill plays, and Tennessee straight up. But once again, if Ryan Tannehill isn't active for the 3rd straight game, I'm going to take Denver here +2, and I will also be fair, I will update that spread and take that line according to Tannehill. So, I will take Denver +2 and Denver against the spread if Tannehill does play. So, those are my thoughts on that game. Now, the next game, the Kansas City Chiefs over the Jacksonville Jaguars. Mahomes is the first quarterback in the Super Bowl era to at least have 400 passing yards and a touchdown pass and 60 yards rushing and a touchdown run in the same game. He's won his 5th consecutive game while trailing at halftime, which that's the 2nd time he's had that streak. He joins Peyton Manning as the only quarterbacks with that kind of streak. Also, this was a cool stat that I found out. Patrick Mahomes and Malik Willis. Patrick Mahomes won a game with the biggest disparity in terms of quarterback completions in NFL history. The biggest one was between the Titans and Patriots back in week 12 of 2009 when they were in a massive snowstorm. And they lost 55-0. But yeah, there was 48 completions for Patrick Mahomes on 60 plus attempts, and Malik Willis only completed 5 passes. So that's a cool little fun stat there, people to know. And Patrick Mahomes was really pulling his best Josh Allen because the Chiefs running backs, or Bonchero, McKinnon, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, all combined, they had 12 carries for 14 yards in that game. So, when you look at the Chiefs, it wasn't pretty. It definitely, you have to give the Titans defense a lot more credit than I thought, especially with some of the defensive injuries they've had. But at the end of the day, Patrick Mahomes, he is who he is. He had the big, 17-yard run. He had 60, Patrick Mahomes on the last drive, it wasn't his arm that won the game. It was his legs, which was incredibly, impressive. And I think with the Chiefs getting, some more talent, Butker in an awkward game as well. He missed an extra point and I believe a 47-yard field goal, which is something that he normally doesn't do. So hopefully, he can get his leg back working in a better way or, more consistent. But with Butker's track record, I'm just going to give him a mulligan pass. They'll move on next week. But they're playing a Jag team that where the Raiders had blown those leads. The Jags didn't have a great history of winning those games either. But somehow the Jags are now 2-116 in their franchise history in both regular and postseason when they trail by 17-plus points. And I think one of the biggest reasons is the emergence of Travis Etienne, who in his ninth NFL game in 4 starts, and every start of his career he's gained 100-plus yards from scrimmage, and he has come just 4 yards away from gaining 100 yards rushing in every game. So he's been a really good pounding force for them to balance out. I would give Christian Kirk, I forget who scored the other touchdown, but they played really well. And the Jags defense, after giving up that 17-0 lead through the first quarter, in the second half alone, the Jags held the Raiders offense to a grand total of 63 total yards in the second half. And I do think with the Jags, with how they have shown moments, I do think with how bad that Chiefs run defense can be, because Derrick Henry got 100-plus yards, I do think the Jags can hang around this game. This Chiefs defense has always been the Achilles heel, and just seeing how tough it was struggling for Mahomes to make plays to, some big receivers, I just think the Jags can hold on enough with their offense, with controlling the clock, with Lawrence playing hopefully an efficient game, that they cover the 9.5 points. Could I see the Chiefs blowing at the Jags? Maybe, sure. It's Jacksonville. Jacksonville and KC have kind of had an awkward history. KC's always been predominantly the better team in most occasions. So, they know how to, play these teams. But after what I saw from the Jags and what I've seen out of the Chiefs, I do think the Chiefs win this game outright. But I just think Jacksonville can hold on to that 9.5 point spread with the combination of Lawrence, Jones, Etienne, and Kirk. And their defense, too. So that's why I like Kansas City here to win straight up, but Jacksonville plus 9.5. The next game, the Miami Dolphins over the Cleveland Browns. This is one, to me, to where it is the Miami Dolphins being the more consistent and having the better talent in certain spots. Nick Chubb is the second leading rusher in the league, only behind Derrick Henry. He has, I believe, the most rushing touchdowns in the league, which is impressive. And they're going up against the Dolphins defense that, over the last several weeks, has not been very good defensively in doing that. Also, I do want to give the Cleveland Browns credit. Fun fact, through Joe Burrow's entire career, through the last 3 years, Joe Burrow has never been able to beat the Cleveland Browns in the regular season. I don't get it. It's an awkward division thing. Because the Bengals over the last couple years have at least been clearly better than the Browns. And it just seems like every time that the Browns play the Browns have the Bengals number for some odd reason. It's probably when they go over the Ohio or whatever. And I'm going to give Myles Garrett credit. He is having a very good season. He has had 7.5 sacks in 7 games so far for himself. And I remember I said earlier in one of my videos a couple weeks ago, he has broken the record held by Clay Matthews for the most sacks in Cleveland Browns franchise history. Also, when you look at Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, they have the most receiving yards in a 9-game span in NFL history in the Super Bowl era. They have also combined for the most receiving yards per game at 212.9 by a teammate duo in a single season. So, that's incredible because you look at and it's amazing with the Dolphins offense, that when you look at the Dolphins offense, it's really only Tyreek and Jalen and then the running back, Raheem. right? You know, I know they had Jeff Wilson, but they have three guys in Mike Gesicki, Trent Sherfield, and Cedric Wilson who aren't bums. Those three guys aren't bums, and it just, you look at the Dolphins and just go, Tua just looks for both the speedsters, and he really doesn't need anybody else to work around. I feel bad for Gesicki because that's hurting his market value at the end of the season, but it's amazing seeing Tyreek Hill crack, on this pace for 2,000 yards, an NFL mark that no player as old as the beginning of the time of the year of the league till now, the most current. I don't think anybody ever expected a wide receiver to get 2,000 yards receiving. But I do think, and I'll ask everybody out there to watch the video, do you believe that Tyreek Hill will pass 2,000 yards receiving and likely be the offensive player of the year and maybe get a couple MVP votes for just how dominant he's been? When you look at this game, it's going to be in Miami. Having to play in the heat is always going to be kind of an interesting issue for Cleveland. I do think, Cleveland's running game with Hunt and Chubb, that'll be kind of matched against Miami's. Though I do want to make a fun little fact for everybody. So, Emmanuel Ogbah and Bradley Chubb, and it's not fair for Bradley Chubb. Okay? I know we just got there. But Bradley Chubb and Emmanuel Ogbah, man, they make, what, like almost $180 million, or $185 million, or like $175 million together. And both those guys in their debut as a duo, or just overall for Ogbah and Chubb, statistically on the Dolphins, they have 8 combined tackles and 1 sack. So, I just want to admit, that was a ridiculous contract by the Miami Dolphins to give to Bradley Chubb. And Emmanuel Ogbah, wow! 7 tackles for $15 million. Wow, we could have, what guy could have done that? That's what I'm saying. I just look at Emmanuel, and people can disagree with it. They paid Bradley Chubb to admit that they made a mistake on Emmanuel Ogbah. Why do you do that? You have these 2 high-paid pass rushers, and the best pass rusher of the day is Melvin Ingram, who's making $4 million. He's making $4 million this year, and you have 2 guys that are making, 15? Or, 23? And then, they're making 38 combined, and their best pass rusher this year has been Melvin Ingram, the journeyman pass rusher that's been everywhere. He got his big contract. And look how that turned out. And I'm looking at these 2 other pass rushers, you guys are going to be the next Melvin Ingrams too. So, sorry for a little tangent there, but yeah. So, but I'm going to take the Dolphins here. I'm going to trust that the Dolphins offense, with their passing, can outplay the Cleveland Browns rushing attack. And if it gets into an offensive shootout, I will trust the Dolphins at home to win this one in in a very awkward way. I do think if Deshaun was in this game, this would make this game a lot more different. But with Jacoby still there for the next few weeks, I do think that the Miami Dolphins win this one in another kind of effective way. So that's why I like Miami here, -4, Miami straight up. The next game, the New York Giants over the Houston Texans. I am taking the New York Giants here because they've been just clearly the better football team. I want to give the Texans a little bit of credit. Dameon Pierce is 4th in the league in rushing, and he's probably going to win the Offensive Rookie of the Year, and he's earned that. And the Texans, in terms of a betting perspective, have been able to keep the games close against the spread in most of the year. They've been able to win most of the games against the spread most times this year. And the Giants, look, through their 8 games, they are 6-2 in 1-score games. They're 6-2 as a team. They've been in 1-score games all year, but they have the 9th-ranked defense in points, and they give up the 2nd most rushing yards per attempt. So I think that'll be the big Achilles heel that the Texans will try to use. But the Giants do force more fumbles than any team in the league so far this year. And when you're looking at Brian Daboll, Lovie Smith, I think Brian Daboll is a good, he's a good coach. I think he'll be able to bounce back off a bye. And I just think the Giants win this gritty type of tough game. Playing the Seahawks, obviously, and playing the Texans are 2 completely different levels of skill, 2 completely different levels of talent. If the Texans somehow beat the Giants, which maybe could happen, maybe, I just think the Giants, they just play a sound, fundamental game with very good management, a good dose of Saquon, and I think I think that the Giants receivers make a couple key plays, and the Giants win this game. And Tanner Hudson makes a few plays as well. So That's why I like the Houston Texans here +7, but the New York Giants to win straight up. The next game, the New Orleans Saints over the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is one to where the Pittsburgh Steelers, ever since Kenny Pickett has been able, in the 3 games Kenny Pickett has been able to finish, they've only scored 8.67 points per game, and they are averaging at least 2 turnovers a game. The Saints defense coming off a massive high, shutting out the Las Vegas Raiders 24-0 in their last game. Also, Alvin Kamara scored his first 3 touchdowns of the season. And amazingly, through the month of October, right, just for a fun fact, New Orleans Saints had the best offense. They scored the most points per game over the last month than any team in the league, which is amazing to think about. Their defense was about just as equally as bad. And, that was the problem. That's why they lost a couple of the games they did. But I do want to say this, for anybody out there that wants a new, young offensive mind, give Pete Carmichael, the Saints offensive coordinator, who was Sean Payton's offensive coordinator for 15 years, give that man a call, because he is showing you, without Drew and without Sean, he still can produce offense, even without Michael Thomas and all those weapons due to that dislocated toe. But I think this game could Pittsburgh be competitive. Sure, New Orleans has been an awkward team, and they're just all the veterans and a lot of injuries. And if T.J. Watt comes back, the Steelers are tied with, I believe, the Raiders for having the fewest sacks, or second. They've only had 8 sacks through 8 games, which isn't great, especially for T.J. not being there. But at the end of the day, I just think the Saints with Dalton, with the weapons they have and the experience compared to Pickett going up against that Saints defense, which feels pretty good and confident, I think the Saints go into Pittsburgh and get a nice, good victory to keep themselves alive in the NFC South race. So that's like the New Orleans Saints here, -2.5, New Orleans Saints straight up. The next game, the Las Vegas Raiders over the Indianapolis Colts. This one, I had a bunch of stats, but if anybody has not heard already, the big breaking news story of today, the Frank Reich, the Indianapolis Colts head coach, has been fired after a 3-5-1 start. He was 40-33-1 in his 74 games. Good riddance to the man. He was a bum. He was given a 5-year contract extension that he did not deserve. In fact, if they did not give him that 5-year extension, they would not have had to pay him for the next few years, and they could have just fired him after 2021, and then they could have just started fresh then. The Colts offense, though, was just a disaster yesterday. They were held to 0-14 on third down, and their offensive line, which was the cornerstone of that franchise for the last few years, gave the 3rd most sacks in their franchise history with 9 sacks to the New England Patriots. Matthew Judon and Josh Uche both had 3. And the Colts were held to 121 total yards as an offense. That's pathetic in today's game. And that was with Sam Allen. So, the Raiders, look, I'm not going to bash on the Raiders, even though I will mention that for the first 61 years of the Raiders franchise history, they blew 17-point leads 5 times. In the first 8 games of Josh McDaniels' tenure, they have blown 17-point leads 3 times already this season. Davante Adams, too. This was the weird thing, too. When you look at Davante Adams' game, first half, incredible run. He had 9 receptions for 146 yards and 2 touchdowns. By the second half, at the end of the game, he ended up with 10 receptions for 146 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yes, that meant in the second half of the game, Davante Adams only had 1 catch for no yards, and that was the rest of his impact in the game. And that's just bad. And if it wasn't for Frank now getting fired... Oh, yeah, and just for a fun fact, everybody, Jeff Saturday, the multiple-time Pro Bowl center and ESPN analyst who was coaching at a Christian Georgia high school just a couple years ago, and by the way, in his last year, they went 3-7. He is now the new interim head coach for the Indianapolis Colts. That is an absolute downright pathetic decision by Jim Irsay and Chris Ballard. That is just Jim Irsay being a homeboy for the olden times of 16 years ago, because there were plenty of candidates on the staff, and there's a certain linebacker coach in Miami that would be very glad to hear this case for his own actions, but I will let people decipher that or figure that out themselves. I just think, look, you're gonna tell Jeff Saturday you have to play the Raiders. You might have found a perfect opponent to play in your first game. Even though I have to tell you, I guess I'm gonna make one little quick Josh McDaniels tangent. If that man loses to a center, a Pro Bowl center that's never coached a day in college or pro football, I am going to have a field day with Josh McDaniels, and every one of the people that love Josh McDaniels, you all can stick it. You all can sit on it. You all can have to go back and look like absolute morons, because I am going to laugh my head off to the bank if Josh McDaniels loses that game. So, and he should be fired that night in Las Vegas. If he loses to a center, oh man. Okay, sorry. Yeah, but in all honesty, I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't think it's gonna happen. I am interested to see how that line goes with that 6.5 points now with Jeff Saturday being involved. I think that's gonna be a 10-point line, so I'm very fortunate I'm making this video now at 6. But we'll see. But yeah, I'm gonna take the Raiders here. They at least have a coaching staff, an incompetent one, but it's better than one that has no experience. So that's why I like the Las Vegas Raiders here -6 and Las Vegas Raiders straight up. And then the next game, the Dallas Cowboys over the Green Bay Packers. This is the one where the Cowboys have the most points scored in a single game this season at 49 2 weeks ago against the Bears. Dallas' defense is third in points and 10th in yards. The Achilles heel for the Cowboys is their rushing defense. They are the 8th worst rushing defense in the league. And I do think for the Packers that should be an advantage because they were able to try to find a running game. They did run for 190 yards 2 weeks ago against the Bills. But with the injuries to Romeo Doubs and Rashawn Gary has a torn ACL. How frustrated Rodgers looks. Aaron Jones should be able to play, so that helps. I just think if they force Rodgers to throw and they could just stack the box, I don't think this Cowboys defense is going to be able to pass the ball that effectively. I think Dak and them should be able to play an effective enough game. The Packers' run defense is not that great either. So I think that they'll be able to run the ball with Zeke and Pollard effectively. I think Dak will be able to make some nice play action passes to Hendershot, Schultz, to Lamb, to Gallup, to that entire Dallas team. And this is going to be a rare opportunity for the Cowboys because in Aaron Rodgers' career, regular and postseason, he is 7-2 all time against the Cowboys. But you just look at this game, and where this game was supposed to be a fun opportunity, or maybe you thought, okay, they would beat the Lions, this now just looks like an absolute drubbing by the Cowboys, into the Packers. Like, this is the first time since 2008 they've lost 5 straight games, and I think for Aaron Rodgers, it is on the table, everybody, that he might retire at the end of this year just because he might not want to come back to a team that doesn't have a lot of hope. I think he's a big reason why they don't have a lot of hope, but I digress. But I'm going to take the Cowboys here. I just think, again, they're rested. They should be getting some of their starters back. They have a great defense that can limit, if the Cowboys can score 13-17, that'll be enough. I think that Cowboy defense, if they score 13 points, I don't think that Packer offense can put up more than 10. So if they put up 13, I think the Cowboys win regardless. And I can't trust that Packer offense to save my life. So that's why Dallas here -5 and Dallas straight up. The next game, the Los Angeles Rams over the Arizona Cardinals. This is one to where I'm going to go with the better quarterback. I'm going to take Matthew Stafford to outplay Kyler Murray. I'm going to take the Cardinals on the line because this game is a literal coin flip in terms of just how bad these two teams are. The Cardinals running backs, Eno Benjamin and James Conner, only ran for 11 carries for 57 yards. They had no run game. It's the second worst Cardinals defensive points per game, and 6th worst in yards per game. I do want to give DeAndre Hopkins some credit. He's caught 2 touchdowns in 3 games since he's been back. But the Cardinals just looked disastrous. They gave up 2 13-play drives that resulted in touchdowns. And it wasn't great. But you're playing a Rams team that is last in terms of big plays, which are 10-plus yard runs or 20-plus yard passes. They're the second worst teams in yards per game. They have one of the 3 worst overall scoring offenses. And here's how crazy and how dependent that Matthew Stafford has become on Cooper Kupp. If you take Cooper Kupp's production from yesterday, if you take that away, this man threw for 38 yards passing. 38 yards. Tyler Higbee and Van Jefferson did nothing. They had 6 targets the whole game. Could not catch any of them. So again, at the end of the day, I'm going to trust that Stafford can Stafford will make some more plays against, I think Stafford's offense will make enough plays against the Cardinals defense. I don't know. The defensive line for the Cardinals should be ecstatic to play the Rams offensive line once again. I think the last time they played a few weeks ago, that was the first time in Stafford's Rams career he didn't throw a touchdown. And that's what I'm saying. Again, could the Cardinals win this game? Sure. I think the Cardinals just because I at least know the Cardinals can score. They can't stop anybody, but it's can the Rams actually, get points and score? And they're going to be at home. They beat this team before 20-12 earlier in the year. I do think the Rams' defensive pass rush should be able to have some impact. Should be able to have some sort of impact. But I'm going to take the Rams here just for the better quarterback and home field advantage. I wouldn't be surprised if all the Cardinals won, but I'm just going to trust that over what I've seen out of Arizona. So that's why I like Arizona here plus 3.5, but the Los Angeles Rams straight up. And in the final two games, the San Francisco 49ers over the Los Angeles Chargers. I am taking the San Francisco 49ers because this is a team that right now they have won 8 straight games over the Los Angeles Rams. That is 4 consecutive seasons that they have beaten the Rams in the regular season, though the one game that mattered, the Rams won. They have the best rushing defense in the league and the number 1 defense in terms of yards per game. And you have Jimmy Garoppolo in primetime television. He is the anti-Kirk Cousins, very much in that way. The Jimmy Garoppolo in primetime, he is 12-6 for a career. He has his best TD interception ratio. And this Niners team, man, just knows how to win in these big spots. They're playing a Charger team that, again, they're 5-3. But you feel very much like the Falcons to where, like, they're a good team, but do you really have faith in them? Like, you would take the Jets right now in the AFC. You take the Dolphins. You take the Ravens. You take the Bengals, who have 1 game fewer than that. You take those 5 teams along with the Bills. You take 7 teams already. And you could argue even the Patriots. You know, the Chargers are a team that they have all the talent. They've gone through a lot of injuries. But you just don't know about them. And that's my problem. It's like the Niners, from what I've seen out of the last week, coming off a bye with all the talent they have, they should be able to win this game against a Charger team that is very banged up defensively. No Joey Bosa, no J.C. Jackson. They don't have Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. They just have too many injuries on the offensive line, receiving core, secondary, and pass rush that I just don't see how the Chargers win the game. They do have Herbert, who was leading the league in terms of passing attempts per game. I think he's like thrown 40-plus attempts a game, which is amazing. And I'm going to take the Niners because I'm going to trust the defense to play well. And I think 7's different than 11. But I do think the Chargers, I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers covered. I wouldn't be surprised. I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers covered. But I'm going to take San Francisco just because, again, they're rested. They should be getting more guys back. And I think the Niners just are clearly the better football team entering this game. So that's why I like San Francisco here -7 and San Francisco straight up. And finally, the Philadelphia Eagles over the Washington Commanders. They're the best turnover differential in the league. The Eagles are at their best record to start in franchise history at 8-0. 7 of the 29 teams that went 8-0 did win the Super Bowl. I love what Jalen's doing, and I do think right now Jalen Hurts is the MVP of the league. Because of how bad Josh Allen played and kind of how awkward Mahomes was last night. But I do want to tell a new Achilles heel that I found out from Mina Kimes. Shout out to her. She did mention that the Eagles give up the most yards per carry after contact in the league. They give up 2.2 extra yards per carry after contact is initiated. So I do think that will be interesting going up, against some better running teams, or especially San Francisco, moving forward into the postseason. And Washington, look, they've been more competitive with Heineke and all that, whatever. But I just can't trust them. Look, they lost 24-8 with Wentz before. Wentz looked like a complete basket case through 3 quarters. I don't think Heineke's going to look as bad. But I'm just going to trust that maybe the Eagles and Commanders, just like I had before, maybe the Commanders are going to limit the amount of offense after the second quarter. And I think they hold on to that 10-point win. I'd be a little surprised if the Eagles could, win by 11 plus points. I know they won by 16 before, but, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I just think, the Eagles are clearly the better team. The Commanders, they're going to be feisty. They've been competitive, and they're still somewhat alive in the postseason chase. But I think as their season ends with the schedule they have, they'll make it a 1 or 2 here, but they're not going to win a lot of games. And I do believe I do believe they finish 5-12, and Ron Rivera gets fired at the end of the year. So that's why I like the Philadelphia Eagles here to win straight up at the Washington Commanders plus 10.5. And that is it. So good luck to all players, coaches, teams, fellow prognosticators, and shout out to guys like Half Moon's Picks, Andrew Warren, Bridgewater's Finest, Sports Fan Entertainment, Fire and Brim Sports, Philly Takeoff RB if you're a Philadelphia fan, please check him out. And all different kinds of guys and gals that make predictions like I do every single weekend, Half Moon's Picks. And until next week, until week 11, this is Matt the NFL Fanatic signing off. Until next time, everyone, so long.